Let's start by organizing this code into different classes. First thing I want to organize are these using statements. I want to use these using statements in each file. Recently, a new feature was added in C#, which allows us to use global using directives. So as you can see over here, it shows which using statements are globally available, and these come from the project file. So if you go edit, you can see there are some implicit usings. These using statements are listed over here. What I want to do is the same thing, but for these two using statements. So what I'm going to do is create a new class for this called global using statements, where I will just take these two using statements and make them global. Now, as you can see, the code works the same without those using statements at the top. Next, I want to introduce a window class, which will hold the logic for opening a window and closing the window and setting up some of these values. So let's add it. Let's start by adding these width and height values and a title. The things I want the user to be able to set is the title, width in characters and height in characters. So I will put those together, and width in pixels we will provide, but we'll keep it private. And since I'm going to be setting these, when you set these, I want to make those private fields as well. All right. This width in pixels, I don't yet know how I will calculate, so I will just make that a method. Let's create a calculations class for that. Let's for now just add two methods. One will be width in pixels for characters, and we want to pass in number of characters. And let's for now return 0, and let's do the same for the height. Okay. Let's set this to calculations dot width in pixels for characters, and let's provide the number of characters. Oh, this should be int. Okay, and let's do the same for the height. And there we go. Let's set a default title to ASCII Game Engine project. And let's expose two methods for opening and closing the window. So if the window is already open, we don't want to open it. And if the window isn't open, we don't want to close. So when we want to open it, okay, is open is true, that's correct. Before that, let's just take this one. And let's set this to width in pixels, and this one to height in pixels, and this one to title. Okay, so these need to be integers, so let me just convert these to integers. And these methods will then return integers. Okay, so that's it. So we open the window and we set the isOpen flag to true. That's it for that one, and we want to use close window for window close method. And we also want to set isOpen to false after we've closed the window. So what we want to do is set these values at the start. Okay, so let's set those window values. So title, let's say we want to create a snake game, so let's say snake. Within pixels we cannot set, so we can set in characters, that's what we want since this is a console game engine. And let's say this is 60 characters wide, and let's set the height to about 30. And let's change, since we return 0 in these calculations, let's not do that, let's just take the number and multiply it by, let's say, 20 pixels. And let's also do the same for the height. So this part This is a game loop, so let's create a game class which will hold these. And let's say we want to put that in the run method. So the first thing we want to do is we want to open the window, and after the game is done, we want to close the window. We don't want to do anything here, so this logic we want to leave up to the user of this game engine. So let's create a callback method which will be called here instead. Since Unity has a method called update, and that's the probably most popular game engine, I'm going to call that callback method update. Let's create a field for that. To store a function, we use type action. If it returns nothing, if we want to return something, we use func. Here I'm going to just use action, which takes no parameters and returns nothing, and we want to call it update. Alright, and we want by default for it to be null. This is nullable. Here we want to call that update method, but if I do it like this, it will crash in case the update method is null, which it is by default. So I'm going to use the question mark operator, which allows us to access methods like invoke, but first checks that the thing we are calling isn't null. So for example, if this update property is null, it will check, is the update property null? If it is, it will not proceed to the next part on the right, which is this .invoke. And invoke is just the same thing as doing this, but we have to use the invoke since we cannot do this. It doesn't recognize what we want. Instead, we have to explicitly say invoke this method. So what we want to do is provide this logic inside this update callback. So let's create this method. So we can say game.update equals, and let's say we will create an update method, which is just a static void update. And there we are. And let's paste this in, and we will have the same logic as before. All we have to do now is call game.run. Let's try to run this. And there we go. We have the snake as the title. Width is 60 characters, height is 30 characters, so that's why it is 2:1 resolution ratio.